We have talked on this show quite a bit about how the Justice Department is prosecuting the rioters who attacked the Capitol on January 6th. But as far as the people who sent them there, the people who planned and encouraged the attack on the Capitol, who came up with this whole scheme that if you had a mob there pressuring the vice president and Republicans in Congress in just the right way, that could stop the certification of the election. The people who actually came up with this scheme to try to dismantle the peaceful transition of power in this country. The Justice Department doesn't seem actively engaged on that front. They appear to be going after the rioters themselves only. But Congresswoman Liz Cheney is making it clear tonight that the January 6th investigation is paying close attention to how this all happened. And specifically the question of whether or not former President Trump himself could be criminally liable for what happened. This is part of what the investigation wants to talk to Mark Meadows about. Listen to this.
Mr. Meadows' testimony will bear on another key question before this committee. Did Donald Trump, through action or inaction, corruptly seek to obstruct or impede Congress's official proceedings to count electoral votes? Mr. Meadows also has knowledge regarding President Trump's efforts to persuade state officials to alter their official election results. In Georgia, for instance, Mr. Meadows participated on a phone call between President Trump and Georgia Secretary of State Raffensperger. Meadows was on the phone when President Trump asked the Secretary of State to, quote, find 11,780 votes to change the result of the presidential election in Georgia.
Congresswoman Cheney saying there that the January 6th investigation is looking specifically at former President Trump and whether he corruptly tried to alter the results of the election, whether he corruptly sought to obstruct or impede Congress's official proceedings to count electoral votes, which, of course, is a crime. Mr. Meadows is not the first person in the investigation to be recommended for contempt charges. You'll remember first it was Trump advisor Steve Bannon. Then it was a Justice Department official named Jeff Clark, who Donald Trump reportedly wanted to install as Attorney General so the U.S. Justice Department could help in this effort to force the overturning of the election results. Jeff Clark says he intends to plead the Fifth in the investigation, which, of course, has had us wondering why he feels he needs to plead the Fifth, whether he thinks he might be in some kind of legal jeopardy here, whether some of what he was involved with was not only sort of Benedict Arnold-y, but also potentially criminal. Well, again, listen to what Congresswoman Cheney had to say about that tonight.
In the weeks before January 6th, President Trump's appointees at the Justice Department informed him repeatedly that the president's claims of election fraud were not supported by the evidence and that the election was not, in fact, stolen. President Trump intended to appoint Jeffrey Clark as Attorney General, in part so that Mr. Clark could alter the Department of Justice's conclusions regarding the election. Mr. Clark has informed this committee that he anticipates potential criminal prosecution related to these matters and intends in upcoming testimony to invoke his Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination. As Mr. Meadows' non-privileged texts reveal, Meadows communicated multiple times with a member of Congress who was working with Mr. Clark. Mr. Meadows has no basis to refuse to testify regarding those communications.
Clark has informed the committee he anticipates potential criminal prosecution related to these matters. And Meadows' texts reveal he communicated multiple times with a member of Congress who was working with Jeff Clark. So we learned through Meadows' production to the committee that that Jeff Clark was working with a sitting member of Congress on that at the time. Mark Meadows' documents apparently show which member of Congress that is who was working with Jeff Clark on this scheme for which Mr. Clark is anticipating potential criminal prosecution. So now we're getting down to brass tacks here. This is news tonight from the January 6th investigation. News not just that they are referring Meadows for contempt, but what his production has revealed to them thus far.